Joining me now is Secretary of State and National Security Advisor Marco Rubio. Mr. Secretary, let's look at the state of the war. It's really captured in this chart. I want to put it up on the screen for our viewers. It shows that Russian attacks on Ukraine have nearly doubled since President Trump came into office. And in fact, in July, Russia launched more than 6,000 missiles and drones. That's the highest amount of attacks since the war began. What do you say to Ukrainians who worry that without a ceasefire in place, you are giving Putin more leverage at the negotiating table and a green light to drop more bombs?
Well, the problem with that is that we've been asking for a ceasefire for a long period of time. We think usually it's very hard to negotiate when you're in the middle of hostilities.
I'm sorry. No one is willing to say the truth. It's over. It's over. They lost. America does not hold the cards any longer. These guys are at least trying to entertain the reasons, like the different reasons as to why they are trying to concede to every single maximalist demand that Putin is making by removing their own personal responsibility, or removing the American government's responsibility, at least under this administration. But Russia holds the cards.
But why not impose more sanctions on them and force them to agree to a ceasefire instead of accepting that Putin won't agree to one?
Well, first, I think that's something that a lot of people go around saying that I don't necessarily think is true. I don't think new sanctions on Russia are going to force them to accept the ceasefire. They're already under very severe sanctions. I think that it should be. You could argue that could be a consequence of refusing.
Well, I'm telling you, it's because you can't sanction Russia any more than you already have. You have to start sanctioning your allies. That's the reason why I said it's over. Mother of all sanctions, weapons transfers to Ukraine, all the tech, and Russia still just kept sending human waves over and over and over again and bludgeoned their way into the battle lines that they have arrived at now. At this stage, there are additional sanction packages that you could implement, which would be threatening India, because India is one of the countries in the region that is allowing Russian oil and gas to enter the market. India is the mediator, right? So that would basically shut off a big chunk of the Russian economy. The problem is, I don't think anyone would be on board with that, because we have we've already sanctioned so many countries. We're already bullying so many countries with tariffs. And on top of that, what are you going to do? Make Europe not buy Russian oil and gas by way of India? I don't know if they would be able to withstand the domestic pressure that comes out of that, the price shocks that they already withstood. If you sanction everybody, or if you alienate everybody around the globe, then you're only sanctioning yourself. Trump trade advisor Peter Navarro wrote a very hostile op-ed in the Financial Times today, targeting India over its purchase of Russian oil and threatening the cessation of technology transfer and other retaliatory measures. The thing that does not make sense is that if the U.S. is anyways interested in rebuilding ties with Russia, why is it so offended by India purchasing Russian oil? There's a significant hostility, which may be explained by frustration over India declining to reduce protectionist measures in its own economy and open it up to U.S. competition. I think the other side of the story is that this is in the cards for America. It is the nuclear option for the last remaining sanctions package that they could apply. The problem there, however, is that just like they went in and thought, oh, we are going to cause a significant defeat for the Russian military here by using Ukrainian manpower, and failed to do so, the alternative is the acceleration of American demise even further if they try to push for a sanctions package on India and then they force India into Russian arms by doing so. I think it's a dangerous proposition for American, the continuation of America as a nation state in the global markets, where you're just like, oh, we're going to sanction India. We're going to sanction Europe for purchasing Russian oil and gas. But we're gonna sanction India for being like an entry point for Russian oil and gas into the global markets. When you do that, well, India is supposed to be a major role player against China, major bulwark against China. India is supposed to be your big ally there, a manufacturing hub that you could transfer over to if you want to forcibly remove trade relations that other countries, other allies, regional allies and international allies alike have with China. You got to move them to India. But if you also are entertaining the notion of like crippling the Indian economy, then you have no cards remaining. This is why I keep saying we don't really have the cards. America does not have any of the cards any longer. The Kremlin is negatively reacting to the U.S. proposal that Ukraine receive Article 5-like security guarantees. Russian Foreign Ministry categorically rejects NATO countries sending a military contingent to Ukraine, for the record. So when Trump says like, oh, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do a NATO-like guarantee here, I don't know what he's talking about.
To agree to a ceasefire or the end of hostilities. But there is no evidence that more sanctions, because sanctions take months and sometimes years to bite. And we may very well wind up in that place. I hope not, because that means that peace talks failed.
But so, Mr. Secretary, a lot of people have heard President Trump threaten sanctions for months, and they are wondering, are they empty threats? Why hasn't he punished Putin to date for this war since taking office?
Well, again, every single sanction that was in place on the day he took over remained. And the impact of all those sanctions remain. You know, when the Russians landed in Alaska, they were there to refuel. They had to offer to pay in cash to refuel their airplanes because they can't use our banking system. They face consequences every single day. But the bottom line is that has not altered the direction of this war. That doesn't mean those sanctions are inappropriate. It means it hasn't altered the outcome of it. And here's what we do think.
I mean, this is as close as you're going to get to an American head of state or a secretary of state openly admitting that the sanctions amounted to all for Russia. He said it. For foreign adversaries, sanctions like that only hurt regular people in these countries, and they're not exactly as harmful for like the governance in general. I mean, if they worked, they would have worked in Cuba, or if they worked successfully, they would have worked in Venezuela. All it does is just destroy people's livelihoods. Sanctions only work on your allies, okay? Foreign adversaries, for the most part, have developed their economy entirely around avoiding American sanctions anyway. I mean, Marco Rubio is openly admitting that the sanctions didn't work in terms of thwarting the Russian invasion. Didn't you hear his anecdote? The Russians had to use cash to pay for fuel, cash, Hassan? No, he's literally saying, we have the insane sanctions against them. It's not working. They have to do this embarrassing thing where they have to pay for cash for the fuel. But even then, it doesn't matter. It literally hasn't worked. He just admitted that.
Is important, and that is that we end this war. To end this war, you have to be able to engage with the Russians. As much as people may not like it, as distasteful as people may find it, the only way to end this war is to get the Russians to agree, as well as the Ukrainians, but the Russians to agree to a peace deal. And the minute you issue new sanctions, your ability to get them to the table, our ability to get them to the table, will be severely diminished. That moment may arrive. But when it comes, what you're basically signaling is there is no opportunity for peace at this point. So just let's put on more sanctions and allow more people to get bombed and more people to be killed. And that's what we're trying to stop.
So, Mr. Secretary, what will Russia have to give up? What concessions will Russia, the aggressor, have to make as a part of this peace agreement?
Well, that's what these negotiations are about. And as you can imagine, everybody goes into a negotiation wanting 100% of what they want. That includes Ukraine, but obviously the Russians. And the only way to reach a deal on anything, whether it's in business or in politics or in geopolitics, the only way to reach a deal is for each side to get something and each side to give something. And that's been very difficult. If it was easy, this wouldn't have been going on for 3.5 years. Understand, the longer these wars go on, the harder they are to end, unfortunately, because one side...
What's Russia giving up? This is what I mean when I say they're just like not being honest. And I almost understand why they can't be honest. You can't have the Secretary of State of the United States of America just be like, we lost, we're losing. There's nothing we can do. What do you want us to do? Sanction the entire planet for continuing to get oil and gas from Russia, an OPEC Plus partner, draw further enmity towards the United States of America? We lost. We thought we could have pushed Russia. We thought we could have collapsed their economy. We thought we could have purged their forces from Ukrainian borders without expending a single American active duty combat service member, was simply weapons transfers to Ukraine.
Understand, but you're talking about, to be clear, a supplemental bigger than $24 billion for Ukraine, and that's going to pass in 45 days.
Oh, absolutely. You know why? Because we need it. We haven't lost one soldier in the Ukraine. We spent less than 5% of our military budget. 50% of the Russian army has been destroyed by the Ukrainians. They would be at Crimea already if the administration hadn't been so slow in giving weapons.
And it was an abject failure. And now here we are. In a weird way, I feel like this is like their attitude here is basically, if we don't do it now, we're going to have to do it 3 months from now, 4 months from now, 5 months from now, a year from now. And the battle lines will look even worse. It's basically a way, it's in a way not dissimilar to the immediate off-ramp that Ukraine had in the beginning when they were able to successfully push back the Russian forces from Kyiv. There was a point in time where Ukraine had more leverage than it does currently. If they had taken that deal back then, Ukraine would be in a much better predicament. They didn't. They pushed. They said, we can continue supporting Ukraine militarily. We can see it out all the way to the end. And in that time frame, Ukraine lost more civilians, Ukraine lost more soldiers, and Ukraine lost more territory. So now what remains for the Trump administration to do here is to come to a settlement with Russia that doesn't actually embarrass America too much. You see what I mean? Even down to the mineral deals that Trump is putting together for America, American extraction. How much minerals exist in Ukraine? It's not a whole lot. I think that's just Trump trying to present it as like, no, we get something good out of this deal too. We get the over Ukraine as well, because it's not our war. It's Ukraine's war. They just want to pick apart the remaining, the remainder of the country for scraps, and to make it seem like they didn't take a fat L. America, I mean, they didn't take a fat L in this because they tried it and they lost. So now they're like, no, we're getting something out of this. That's what it feels like, in my opinion. This is not about saving Ukrainian lives. This is more so about how much of a runway we have remaining with two different proxies taking place with Israel and with Ukraine, and with a lot more interest in defending Israel than defending Ukraine, and a lot more interest in helping Israel commit ethnic cleansing in Gaza than defending Ukraine from Russian interests. And also the persistent fears that, like, if China were to do something, they would have they would be caught with their dicks out pissing against the wind in this moment. Because remember, missiles are not an infinite resource. You have to make more missiles. You have to make artillery shells. You have to make more tanks. You have to make more drones. And it's obvious to me that America does not have the capability of continuing to steadily supply Ukraine and Israel at the same time with the same intensity, and simultaneously have Ukraine engage in this war of attrition that they are obviously losing, because their problem is much larger than the weapons that they're receiving, but instead the manpower that has diminished.
Is always looking for leverage on the other, in this particular case, the Russian side as well. And so I think that's the core of what we're trying to work through here. That's why Zelensky's coming tomorrow. That's why European leaders are coming tomorrow. That's why the president called them from the airplane, spent 2 hours in the middle of the night talking to them. And that's why we've been engaged with them every step of the way, is we are trying to find what can we get to that both sides can agree on. And it's been difficult. This is a hard issue set, but we're dedicating a lot of time to it. And the president deserves credit for dedicating time to it.
And I understand that these negotiations are ongoing, but can you name one thing that President Trump is asking Russia to give up in order to get peace?
Well, I'm not going to disclose those things because
because they don't exist. There's literally nothing, because you can't. Also, apparently Donald Trump interrupted his meeting with the European leaders to call Putin. He's like, Vladdy Poo, I'm calling you right now personally from my cell phone. I miss you. I'm with a bunch of these gay, woke Europeans. I hate them. I miss you. You're so bold. You're so brave. You're not like those wokes.
So here's the bottom line. We all know what the elements of such a deal. There has to be talk about what the territories are going to look like, and what the border lines are going to look like at the end of this conflict. There has to be talk about Ukraine's legitimate desire for security in the long term, to make sure they don't get invaded again. There has to be talk about how Ukraine is rebuilt, and how do you rebuild a country that's been attacked as often.
What is this? Hassan, you say they can't do anything further to sanction Russia or get an upper hand, but their low-key is law? Explain. Because if you say India, again, India is more important to American global dominance right now than ever before. The reason why I say it's like the nuclear option for sanctions is because it would actually cook us. You're right. It would cook the Russian economy, right? They're done after that. The problem is it would destroy the global economy in general, which, I mean, Trump has entertained that for his own personal ambitions, like with the tariffs and but basically it would alienate what remains of the allies that America has. Because walk through the steps of how you would engage in this, right? Like you have to sanction India, or you have to sanction what, like European countries with no meaningful alternative to Russian oil. I'm fairly certain that many of these European countries would not be able to overcome the domestic instability that would cause, because a version of this already happened with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And that's part of the reason why so many right-wing parties rose to power in the process, pointing the finger at blame at like migrants and brown people when they were experiencing cost of living crises born out of the energy prices skyrocketing. Any kind of volatility almost always pushes these countries into the hands of fascism. And it did already. America also used the opportunity that it had to become a market substitute for American gas in Europe as opposed to Russia. So they already took advantage of that too.
And as it has over the last 3.5 years, these are all key elements of any agreement. We understand that. And each side is, if there's going to be a deal, each side is going to have to give up on something. That's just a fact.
Mr. Secretary, I want to show folks what Ukraine looks like right now. This is a map of Ukraine. That red section there, that's the area currently under control by Russia. It's about 20% of the entire country. There are reports that Putin...
So can America replace Russian oil as well? It has already tried. It already has to a certain degree. But like the American fossil fuel industry also relies on OPEC Plus setting the standard and setting the prices. Russia has a lot of influence over that. So they are still absolutely beholden to market conditions. They're still absolutely beholden to the cartel. And more importantly than all of it, they're beholden to the profit incentives there. And a great example of this is that under the Biden administration, when Saudi Arabia refused to increase oil barrel production to normalize prices because they wanted to continue generating super profits, America couldn't even get the American oil and gas industry to stop selling oil and gas to Europe and sell it to America instead so that we can normalize the energy prices, which played a formative role in the cost of living crisis exploding here. 1.5 years of real negative wage growth in the United States of America under the Brandon leadership, which played a role in Donald Trump winning again. That's literally what happened. So if your argument is, why doesn't the American oil and gas industry like undercut the competition and artificially lower the price of oil and gas by like pumping out as much oil as possible? I don't even know if they have the capability to do that. I don't even know if we have the infrastructure ready for that. And I certainly don't think that any of these companies have the interest in doing so, because it would undercut their own financial imperative, which is to keep prices stable, play along with the cartel, because they are the ones who still end up benefiting from it.
Mr. Secretary, you were one of the few people in that room with President Putin and President Trump. You got to look him in the eyes. Do you believe that President Putin believes in Ukraine's right to exist based on what you heard and saw?
Well, look, I wasn't playing any of those games about looking people in the eye and trying to read their minds. I'm reading actions.
Wait. Does Russia have a right to exist? Does Russia have a right to exist? Why are you being Russophobic? Suka blyat. Russia is small nation. Russia constantly under attack. Russia number one. Oh, you want Kievan Rus? Do you? You are being Russophobic. Oh, why you always say Slava Ukraini? Why you always say Kievan Rus? Russia small nation. Russia used to be much larger nation. This is 3,000 years ago. This was all Russia. Do you condemn Ukraini? Do you condemn Ukraine? That's what it would be like if the media treated Russia like they treat Israel.
Looking at is actions. What will you agree to? What will you commit to? And what will you follow up on? And in order for this war to end, Russia will have to take actions. Ukraine will have to take actions. Ukraine's partners and allies will have to take actions as well to enforce that peace in the long term. That's what we're interested in. Not all, I get all the drama around this stuff, but at the end of the day, we are talking about a war in which people are being killed and maimed every single day.
Yeah. Do you condemn Nord Stream 2 explosion? Do you condemn Nord Stream 2 explosion? Do you condemn Ukraine drone attacks in Moscow? Do you condemn? Do you condemn 14,000 killed in LPR, DPR? Да, давай. Как дела, как тебя зовут?
In which a country has been dismembered by 20%, as you've just pointed out, and it's really important to bring this war to an end. This war doesn't get better. It gets worse as time goes on. It gets worse. It actually threatens to spill over into other areas. So it needs to be stopped. That's why the president's made it a priority, and that's what we're focused on. Concrete actions by both sides, especially the Russian side, to bring this conflict to an end, and we're going to do everything we can to make it happen. Is it possible? I don't know, but we're going to try. We've spent a lot of time on this issue. We have a lot of other issues to focus on, but the president's made this a priority, and he deserves credit for that.
Mr. Secretary,
Yeah, it's actually Russophobic to call it Ukraine. It's Greater Russia. Yeah. 3,000 years ago, it was promised to me. It was. I mean, Vladimir Putin does say that. Not 3,000 years ago, but he's like, look at map. Look at map. The Ukraine, it means the border. The border of what? Russia. Ukraine and Russians, they are brothers. They are brothers. Why? Why are you so, what is it? What would it be? It's, you're so Orthodox Christian phobic. I don't even know. You are being anti-Slav.
More questions, and we're almost out of time. NBC News is reporting this morning.
Tovarish, niet politik here. Tovarish, niet politik here.
That NATO-like security guarantees for Ukraine were discussed as a part of this agreement. Can you tell us what role would the United States play in such a security agreement?
Well, there'll have to be some security guarantees for Ukraine, right? I mean, it's one of their fundamental demands is that if this war were to end, they have to make sure this never happens again. They don't want to get reinvaded. They don't want to wait 3 or 4 years from now and find another, war on their hands. So there's going to have to be some security guarantees as part of it. How that's structured, how that's built, what our role will be, that'll be the kinds of things we'll have to work through.
OSIN Twitter / Walter Bloomberg, everyone's most reliable news resource that actually erased $4 trillion and then replaced $4 trillion of market value with one fucking tweet, a real mover and shaker, reports Ukraine's Air Force says Russian strategic bombers take off for a possible attack on Ukraine. This is right after the Trump phone call. Dude, I swear to God, Russia is doing Israel without being Israel. I guess everyone is Israel now. The world is Israel. This reminds me, I don't know if it's real or not, and it probably might be fake, but they did do a version of this after the fucking Trump talks in Alaska. And that reminds me of the way Benjamin Netanyahu has treated Joe Biden and also Donald Trump. We are so fucking washed, and it's not just because Trump is a joke. We're just washed, man. We're washed. We're washed. Everything is Israel. Even our foreign adversaries are behaving like Israel.